These testimonials are representative of my or our experiences, but the exact results and experience will be unique and individual to each person. The information provided herein is not medical advice and is not intended to substitute for the advice of your personal physician or other healthcare providers.
Best way.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Beautiful Bag podcast. I am here with Jenny Harrison. We met back in August at the UAA convention. She does a lot of work with Girls with Guts. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about her journey. She also has some things to talk about, like how her dad was an inspiration for her in a few things and in her journey. So we're going to get into all of those things today. So without further ado, Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you, LeeAnne. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. It's funny how we do this online and now we can see each other's faces.
Yeah, it's so wonderful. It's so funny how we deal with like text-based communication all the time or things like that. And so it's always nice to connect like face to face in the online environment.
Exactly. So all of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see our faces and see where we're sitting. I am here in the loft, and Jenny is at her home too, where she lives. So, Jenny, let's get into your story because you've had your ostomy for quite a while, and due through IBD and all of that. So why don't you kind of take us down, a little bit of that journey of what your life was like prior?
Sure. So yeah, I will be celebrating my 17th stomaversary next week, which is incredible to me that it's been like 17 years with my stoma. This one feels bigger to me for some reason, and my partner keeps saying it's because it can now go to R-rated movies. I don't think that's the case, but I'm so grateful for it. So before I had pediatric IBD, so I was diagnosed with Crohn's when I was 9. And at first, I had fairly mild disease. And then I hit puberty, and everything was off the table at that point. And so I was fortunate to have a diagnosis at a young age. My dad also had Crohn's. So it was fairly quickly that they suspected that I had Crohn's. And so I was diagnosed at 9. And then puberty came, and it became very severe very quickly. And so for individuals who have IBD, today we live in a world with all these great medicines. Back then, we didn't yet have biologics. And so we only really had prednisone. Some of the ASA meds existed, but that was really it. And so there was a lot more surgeries back then. There was a lot more, complications of having IBD that are becoming less prevalent these days. So disease became very quickly severe. I ended up with perianal disease. I ended up with rectovaginal fistulae, which was great as an adolescent girl, let me tell you.
It's hard enough. It's hard enough.
Going through all of these things, and I was 16 when my doctor first said to me, "You may need an ostomy." And at that point, I was in the refusal camp. I was not going to have a bag. It was not going to happen. And that was just how it was going to be. And a huge part of that was my dad. He was such a role model in many positive ways, but he also had some negative impacts. And one of those was he had such shame about his ostomy. He had his surgery in the early 90s. It was an emergency surgery. He had a perforation. He had no time to prepare mentally. And then also he, being masculine in many ways, wasn't somebody who would share his feelings or reach out for mental health support. And those things really weren't as part of the culture as they are today either. So there was a couple of things like that. And so I didn't want to have a bag. And my dad was in clear one-piece bags. And so that was another piece of it for me where I was like, that's what an ostomy bag looks like. I'm 16. I don't want that. Like, I don't want this situation. So I kept delaying it. And new meds came out, biologics came out. I went on the biologics. I had med failure after med failure. We didn't know back then to do things like check drug levels or do monitoring. We didn't really know about appropriate dosing. So of course the meds failed because they weren't set up to succeed. At that point, the disease was already so advanced that they probably wouldn't have worked anyway. And I kept denying surgery because I thought it would be the most worst possible thing ever. And in doing so, put myself through a lot of suffering. And it was hard. And then finally, I ended up having no choice. I chose to have it, but I also didn't have a choice.
Right. And it gets to that point. And I think you said something right. You said a few things right there. You were in the no camp. And I think there are so many of us, because I can relate to that. Absolute no, not happening. Don't do that. Because, and this was mine was 8 years ago, not 17 years ago. And I was, mid-40s, not 16. And even at that point, it was like, absolutely do not want this to happen. Please no. Right. So but and again, the bags, your dad wore clear bags. He probably didn't realize without researching, without talking, without going, like without having all that outreach that we have nowadays, that there are different bags that you can wear. There are different things that you can have. So that related all into your camp. And you said he was masculine. He's man and he's masculine. He's a man and he's masculine. Men have the hardest time with ostomies. They have a harder time than us. And I think it's because we can share our feelings and we can talk about it and we can, have community around it and we can relate to each other a lot easier than men can. And I think we're helping them. If you're looking online now and seeing the men that talk, I think we're starting to help them like, hey guys, it's okay to share your feelings. It's okay. It's okay.
It is. And he didn't. And I mean, this is also in the times where the internet is in its infancy.
Mhm.
And we are in rural Vermont. Like, my brother who lives there still, he just started getting cell phone service at the house like this year. So, we're talking about a time where we have dial-up internet. And it's very like, so it's not like we have the plethora of role models. It's not like we can easily go online and just search ostomy supplies and see all the different options out there. So that was a huge part of his story. And so it kind of integrated into mine. And so time's passing and I end up in college and I'm getting progressively sicker. And I'm doing things like doing NG feeding and not eating for months and to try to control things. I'm having a plethora of bowel accidents. I've always had bowel accidents because I've had perianal disease. And so I'm having, incontinence to the point that it's continuing. And I'm having increasingly worse symptoms. And my doctor, who I'd been seeing since I was 9, so I had a pediatric GI all the way until I graduated from college, she kept saying, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I'd say to her, you get me to graduation and then I'll consent. And that was my big thing, was I did not want to drop out of school because I had, or take a long medical leave and have surgery because I was afraid I wouldn't go back. And I knew my best chance to have the life that I envisioned for myself was to finish school. And so she and I kind of made this arrangement, and she agreed, and so that's what we did.
And congratulations to you for that, right? You stuck to your guns. Probably not the best choice, but you did, and you graduated. So what did you graduate school with? What
So
degree?
Yes, so my undergraduate degree is, and this is such a funny combination of things, but it was philosophy and sociology. And then my minor was women's studies. And my plan at the time was to go to eventually get my law degree and go into bioethics. That did not happen due primarily to the IBD stuff. But at the time, that was the plan. So my plan was to graduate, take a year off, have surgery, and then go to law school. At that time.
At that time. And like you said, that didn't happen. So let's talk about what happened. So you ended up having your surgery.
I did. And I went in, I knew I was going to have it. I consented in the fall and I had surgery in February. So I had plenty of time to really, I met with the WOCN. The woman who placed my stoma also placed my dad's, which was kind of a fun, sweet, full circle kind of moment. And I had surgery. And I went in with this idea that I was not going to be my father's daughter that way. I was like, I'm going to love this. I am going to love this. This is going to give me a life. I want this. I'm doing this. I'm doing it on my terms. I am going to love this. And there was no other way for me. I just kept saying, I'm going to love it. I'm going to love it. It's how it's going to be. And it was hard, but I often say that I woke up in love with my stoma and I have never fallen out of love with it. So I had surgery, and I started having complications in the hospital. But it wasn't until I was home that it became very evident that I had a post-operative infection.
Okay.
And so that was a huge challenge. It was a perianal infection. And so that infection channeled into vaginal wall. We tried multiple interventions, multiple additional surgeries. Eventually I had a vaginal wound vac. And eventually it took about a year. So it was a year from the date I had surgery, that I was cleared surgically after having that infection.
Wow.
And that was hard. And I was working full time. This is before the ACA. So this is when if you couldn't work, they didn't have expanded Medicaid as much as they do now. There wasn't a lot of safety net. I was living in New Hampshire at the time, and New Hampshire is known to live free or die. And that included not a lot of social supports for somebody who can't work. And so unfortunately, I had to keep working. I had not been at my job for a full year, so I wasn't eligible for FMLA protection. So throughout this whole infection, I'm trying to maintain employment and I'm trying to work to keep my health insurance, because if I didn't keep my health insurance, I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford taking care of this infection. And the doctors kept saying apply a disability, and I kept saying no, it's not going to happen. Because that was my second line in the sand, right? And I think throughout my whole journey, I've had these lines in the sand of I am not doing that, and I am having to do it. And then come to find out it was a great decision, right? So like, and so that was kind of my line in the sand at the time. So I kept working and learning how to live with a new ostomy and trying to figure out all these things. And that was a hard year. It was hard. The infection was the impact of the infection was really, really intense mentally. I because it involved vaginal, and I had vulvar abscesses and things like that. There was questions about what my sex life would be like in the future. There was questions about children or not, those kinds of things, because it really wreaked havoc on more other aspects of my reproductive system. And so the end result was that there was a lot of question marks, and I was 24 and I was going, oh my God, like this is not what I signed up for. And then at the same time, as you know, you have to learn how to live with an ostomy. In the beginning, you have more leaks, there's more complications, you have to learn about hydration, you have to learn, it's a whole new skill set. And, I had this moment of like laying on the bathroom floor, unable to get a bag on with this infection. My stoma was like outputs going everywhere. And I'm going, this was worse. They all lied to me. This was worse. But then it's like, do I stay laying on this floor going, it's worse? Or do I say, no, 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 I love my life. I'm going to love this. I'm going to get through it. And so that was kind of the attitude I had that whole year, of just that blind faith of this is going to be okay.
And that's key right there. You need to have that blind faith, because none of us come into this wanting it.
No.
Right? No, we don't want that. Most times we're saying, no, please hold it. Right? We don't want it. And then you end up with it. And then you do have complications. I remember one time, the first time I took a shower and I was all clean and I felt amazing. And I did it without a bag and I was so happy. And then I looked down and I had poo on my foot and I started crying. And I'm like, I thought it was clean, this whole mess. And you have to get to the point where I'm going to embrace it. You either can go to the dark side and not embrace it and hate it and be more like your father was, or you can choose, and it really is a choice to say, I'm going to love it. I'm going to go to the brighter side. Whether things get better or not, this is my life. love life. I want to be here. There's so many beautiful things here and reasons
Yes.
to be here. And there was a reason that you chose
Mhm.
to get the ostomy because you had visions and dreams and things you wanted to accomplish.
Very much so. And, for me, I think one of the gifts for me though, too, was that it was a permanent ileostomy.
Mhm.
I have an end ileostomy, and there's no going back. It's not temporary. So mentally at 24, I was like, this is my life now. And honestly, that for me, I talked to a lot of people who have ostomies like you, and some individuals who have temporary ostomies. They have a harder time mentally, I think, sometimes because it is temporary. But for me, it was like, no, this is my life now. This is my life. And I want to be in charge of my life and I want to have a good life. And so to do that, I have to love all of me, and that includes my stoma. And so, and then, but once that infection cleared and once I got through that first year, oh my goodness, was it like um God, I love life. And um my ostomy has done nothing but allow me to live it in a way that I never knew was possible. I had never really had tacos before I had surgery. I had been sick for so many years with Crohn's, with food restrictions and dietary things, that I got to all of a sudden experience things that I didn't know were possible. And that's the gift.
That is the gift. So there's a couple things I want to talk to you about because I want to know we're going in such a beautiful place. And it's funny because the month of February, which is when this podcast is airing, is all about love and relationships. And we've talked about your relationship with your dad. We've talked about love and loving your body and loving your ostomy and choosing love over fear. So I want to go down that. I want to hear all the things that you've done in the last 17 years with your ostomy. Before we do that, you mentioned something about wanting to work and pushing yourself to work because you didn't understand disability. And yes, New Hampshire, live free or die. We get that. We get that. There's not a lot of services in the state. However, you decided to get onto disability. For someone who doesn't know that they have that as a choice, what is that process like? I don't think I've ever talked about that here on the podcast. What is that process like for them?
So I ended up actually going on disability in my 30s. So I had more surgery in 2018, and that surgery really was disabling for me. And I wish I had done it sooner because I once again put myself through things I didn't need to put myself through for years, really. Um Disability is hard. It is hard. It is um the word soul sucking comes to mind, um, because the process is deficit based. So, first and foremost, you have to fill out all this paperwork, and it's all about your limitations. And I choose to live looking at the things I can do as opposed to the things I can't do. So, the first and foremost thing is you're having to outline for strangers all of your deficits. And that takes a level of internal strength that you don't think you need until you're sitting there really getting honest about the things that you struggle with. And so that was a challenge for me in and of itself. And then the other piece of it is that they often, it happened to me, they sent me to their psychiatrist as well as their doctors. And I understand the reasons why they may want to do that. But now you have to be very, very vulnerable in front of medical professionals who you don't have any relationship with. And that is really hard because, especially the psychiatric interview where you're having to answer all these questions and go through this, um, with a lot of faith that like it's going to be okay, knowing that the information you're providing is going to end up in the legal system as well. This is government. So there's that piece of it. So those things are really hard. And then more up it's oh my gosh, I forget the numbers now and I wish I had them from my head for you, but more than half of the people who apply are denied the first time.
Mhm.
So you also have to go through this process of denial usually, and that's really hard. And the whole time you're going through this, you can't work. So it takes well over a year. I was very fortunate in that my sisters helped me with my bills, so I didn't end up homeless or things like that. Um, but you can see how it happens, and so it's a really hard process. I I'm very grateful in that I ended up, after my first denial, I got a lawyer. And so it became a little quicker at that point. And lawyers, they can't take a huge portion of your disability. There's legal system in place that caps the amount they can take. So that's really helpful to know. And had I known that earlier, I would have probably sought legal help earlier in the process. So now I'm on disability. And so that means that every 3 years I have a review. I give up certain rights. So, I give up the right to keep my medical stuff confidential. As part of the review system, they have access to my medical records. A judge is involved. So when I finally got disability, I actually had a court date and I was supposed to go in front of the judge. And an hour before my appearance, my lawyer called and said, the judge is going to find you fully disabled if you'll take this deal. And the deal was to change my onset date. So that's another piece of it. It's a very concrete legal system. And so we changed the onset date. So I forfeited back pay to just have it be over with. Because from the day you apply until you're found disabled, they give you your monthly benefit retroactively. But I chose to sacrifice some of that time just to get it done with. So but it is an option. And I will say that having gone through that whole process, now today, I'm able to have a life that I couldn't have otherwise. Nobody's getting rich on disability. I am lucky in that I pushed it off for as long as I did, and I worked 1 or 2 jobs often. So my monthly payment is higher than average. But individuals on disability, you're looking at maybe 1,200 a month.
Mhm.
If it's SSDI, if it's SSI, you're talking, I think it's like 765 is the cap a month. So, this is hard. It's hard. But it also removes the stress of working. And if you really can't do it, the stress relief that comes when all of a sudden you have income coming in, is amazing. And then also you also are entitled to get Medicare benefits.
Mhm.
So you also have pretty decent insurance that will cover you. So you're not having to have the anxiety of losing your insurance or things like that. So there's pros and cons, but it is an option, and there are legal help available. And I highly recommend that if you are somebody who's considering even if you just want to know more about it, you can talk to a lawyer and get a consult, because there's a book, it's called, and it has all the different conditions and the criteria you have to meet to be found disabled for that condition. So ostomy alone won't allow you to have disability. An ostomy is not a legal disability. IBD can be if you meet the criterion for listing. Some forms of cancer can be if you meet the criterion for listing. And then there's an equivalency where if you have the equivalent to a listing criteria in impairment, you can be found disabled. But ostomy alone won't do it.
Thank you for sharing all of that. We've never talked about it here. And I know there are a lot of people that can work, right? Myself included. I just choose to work for myself, which is the better part of it. However, there are a lot of people that are out there, like you said, in their ostomies, it's not, having an ostomy is not the reason you can't get disability just because you have an ostomy. But there are a lot of people that struggle with Crohn's, especially, right? Colitis, you take your large intestine out, you're in an ostomy, and typically you're okay, right? Going forward, you're okay. Crohn's is a whole disease that's different. Complications can make things different. And there's reasons why sometimes maybe you do have to be on disability, but you're not sure how. So thank you for explaining to us the process that it takes. And listeners, I know you heard her. Get a lawyer in the front end. Go to someone in the front end, and they can cap how much they can take from your disability for you if you are in desperate need and you need that. So Jenny, that was very important.
Yeah,
Now,
that's such a huge part of it.
such a huge part of it. And thank you. Now I want to shift gears and go back to 11 relationships because this is February. That needed to be talked about. But
Yes.
this is love and relationships. What has, you went through that first year, so I'm going to back us up. You went through
Yep.
that first year of after your surgery and your infections and getting through all that and making the choice to love rather than hate, making the choice to, this is my life now, this is the positive side of things, this is where I'm going to go, this is where I want to go. What were those dreams and those ambitions that you have and the things that you wanted to accomplish that got you to being able to see forward?
Yeah. So, you know, I wrote about this in a blog I talked about this in Texas. Like, this is, you know, a pivotal moment for me was that taco experience. You know, I was outside and it was spring. And you know how, like, and if you are in New England, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. That first warm breeze of the season, that first, just like, oh, it is over. Like, the dark, cold winter is ending. There's that breeze that comes in. So I'm sitting outside, actually in Keene, New Hampshire, at this restaurant that no longer exists. And my partner at the time, who I actually married and divorced with a stoma. But at the time, you know, he and I are sitting there and he's like, you know, we're gonna get tacos. And I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, your surgeon says you can eat this. And I'm like, but like any good, you know, Crohn's patient, new ostomy, I'm going, oh my goodness, like, what if I get obstructed? What if this happens? Going through all the different like scary things. And he's like, your surgeon says it's okay. Your GI says it's okay. We can, like, we're gonna do this. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. So tacos, salsa, and I take a bite, and oh my goodness, I was like, I have been missing out. Like, and it was just that moment of just, oh my gosh, like, and it felt so hopeful, you know, and just the whole spring and the whole thing. And so that summer I was at the beach in my bikini, new ostomy, here we go. And that was kind of my story. And I hiked and I went camping and I got my master's degree and I had a wonderful career and I did all of these things, not in spite of, but because I had an ostomy. And I got to sit through entire baseball games. I was in the wedding party for my best friend. That would not have happened because I was incontinent and I was stuck in the bathroom for hours a day. I started gaining weight. I started feeling good. I developed a workout routine. I was like in the gym, like lifting weights, like doing all of these things that I never, and there sounds so little and tiny, but for me, it was just like I got to fall in love with what life has to offer because I also was in Crohn's remission. So that surgery gave me years of really solid IBD remission. And I had never been healthy before. My first IBD symptoms were in kindergarten. So I didn't know what life without it looked like. I didn't know what life without pain looked like. And all of a sudden, I was given this life. And it was things that you know, my current partner will say to me that I get such joy out of these tiny little things, and he finds it to be so amazing. And it's like, yeah, I spent over a decade like unable to fully live. Of course, I find like every little thing to be amazing and miraculous. I've had chronic illness my whole life, you know, tomorrow it could change. And you know that so acutely that you just do. I say yes so much more than I say no. People are like, "Hey, you wanna go do this?" "Yes, I do. Yes, I do."
And we talked about food,
Mm,
the love of
um,
food. I love food. I just love
I
food. Hence
I
why I weigh what I weigh. I love food.
Yes. I read menus for fun, you know?
Yeah.
And I was one of those really blessed ostomates, like, I had no adhesions, I had no active disease, so I could eat anything. Like, I'd eat Chinese food, have popcorn that night, like, I would have salads, I was eating, like, I had never really, like, salad wasn't something I was eating when I was in an active Crohn's flare. So I was eating like these huge salads. I was going to all these different restaurants. I was like I had like restaurant bucket lists. Like I'd be like looking up like, okay, I want to go, to this town, and I would travel. I would drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to go have dinner. And it was like, I still do this. Like when we're going on vacation, the first thing I'm doing is Googling local restaurants just to get an idea, just to like, and it's changed. I mean, I came out of remission, and that was incredibly hard. And it coincided with my mom having a prime of life neurodegenerative disorder. And so I had a period of nearly constant bowel obstruction. I had stricturing disease. And so it changed again. And then I had more surgery, and now I have adhesive disease. And so I have adhesions that tether parts of my small bowel. And so I'm prone to have obstructions. But even now, last night for dinner, there was definitely corn as part of that meal. Small amounts, like just a little bit. And you chew and you chew and you chew and you chew, and I take forever to eat. And on some level, I'm kind of playing with a little bit of fire. But also I have studied my body, and I do a pretty good balancing act there. So we take it as it comes.
You take it as it comes, and adhesions are no joke. They're no joke. I have surgical adhesions, and I know where one of them sits.
Yes.
It is right, it's right here, right here. I know
Yes.
exactly where it is in my small intestine. I know exactly when it's happening. I can push on it, and I'm like, it's harder than the rest of my bowel. So I'm like, okay, I know that that's exactly where things will back up. Hence my podcast a few episodes ago being in the hospital because I wanted a salad with shaved Brussels sprouts. Smart, right? And then that created the start of the blockage. And then I just kept, jamming the food in there, thinking that I'm like, it'll pass until it didn't.
Mhm.
We have to learn to listen to our bodies very
Yes.
carefully, especially with abdominal surgeries. No one warned me of adhesions. I
Right.
didn't know. And again, I didn't know that they even existed. It didn't click with me until someone told me eventually, you have adhesions. This was when I was living in New York, and they saw that I had a blockage. I just thought it was normal. They
Yeah.
saw that I had a blockage because I ended up having a blockage during a CT scan.
Oh,
And
wow.
you need to go to the emergency room. I got home, I started tossing my cookies, and my doctor happened to call me right away. And she's like, how are you feeling? And I go, I just threw up like this. I don't know. And she goes, you have a blockage, get in the hospital. I want you to go to the emergency room right now. So I went down that road of my first blockage, understanding that the things that happened to me prior for years wasn't a gallbladder attack. I had them remove my gallbladder. They removed my gallbladder. It was adhesions. It
Oh my
was the
God.
adhesions that are sitting right here. So I could have
Yeah.
kept my gallbladder. I'm keeping the rest of the organs I got.
Yes, keep them.
Keeping them. However, adhesions are no joke. So we have to be very, very, very careful. And you said it. You want it, you can have it, just chew and chew and chew and chew and chew. And I am now on Miralax every single day. I have Miralax to keep my stool soft every single day.
See, it's funny because I'm in the opposite camp. I have a high output ostomy now. So, like you mentioned with Crohn's, it can occur anywhere in your digestive system. So, in 2018, when I had the additional surgery, it was going to be a simple laparoscopic procedure, surgery. The important note of this is that nothing is ever simple in this body. So, she went in laparoscopically, encountered a kinking mass of small bowel. I ended up with a second mainline incision at that point, and she had to resect a lot more than she planned on. So I woke up from that surgery with a high output ostomy. And so I'm on antidiarrheals to slow the output. But it's such a funny thing because too many of those, and it's not great. So you have to find the right dosing, you have to find the right combination of things. And then I also follow a short bowel syndrome diet to help keep it low. And then I have a central line that I self-access for hydration. So I have like this whole routine thing, but then I also get obstructions, which is like the most like, I always laugh with my GI. I'm like, of course it's either, pure liquid, like, high output stoma, or there's nothing at all and I'm obstructed. Like there's no middle ground for me, which is, and that's part of having to study yourself and kind of learn. Like I can get away with having a little bit of corn, but like I'm not going to have that and also popcorn that night. And also, like you said, when you had your issue of continuing to add to that problem, like when I can feel it starting, I'm like, oh no, that was not the right choices I made. Bag off, hot tub immediately to try to clear it myself. And then I kind of take it very, very easy for a while, um, until I know I'm out of those. Because, like you said, they're no joke. It really is adhesions are rough.
They're rough. And I mean, you're in an ileostomy, I'm in a colostomy, and I have the majority of my bowels. They had to take less than a foot of my
Yep.
large intestine, like less than that. So I have the majority of it. So my problem is sometimes I can get constipated and just dehydrated when I'm just not drinking enough fluid, period.
Yes.
And then that all adds in. So it was that when I was in the hospital last time, they were like, you're fully constipated because there's stool in your entire large intestine. So you're constipated on top of the bowel obstruction. Hence why when your intestine was starting to squeeze, it felt like really, truly glass going through every ounce of you. And I'm like, okay, now I understand. Now I'm not going to mess with it. So again, and there's the difference where you have a high output and we are all so different on the foods that we can eat. On, like I said, I have to take Miralax every day and I had to figure out the dosage. Is it just once a day? Is it 4 times a day? Is it 7 times a day? Like, what is that dosage? I didn't even, and I've been with mine for 8 years. I didn't understand that my stool was harder than it should be. I didn't realize that. I thought that that was just normal. And when I was in the hospital, like, no, your stool's harder. It shouldn't be this hard. It should be soft. It should be soft coming out. And I'm like, oh, okay. Now I make sure that it is. And like you said, so you said you were on a high output diet. What does a high output diet look like?
So for me, following the shortcut diet, it's low sugar. So that's first and foremost. Sugar is going to jack my output like nothing else. And I love sugar. So it's such like a balancing act of me trying to be like a responsible like individual who is like doing low sugar. And then at night I'm like, oh man, I just want a cookie. I just need like, so I have to find that balance because I chose to live. And part of that means that I get to have ice cream sometimes, even though I am low sugar. Um, it's eating multiple small meals a day. It's not eating and drinking at the exact same time. So it's eating and then, an hour later doing a little bit of fluid. And that's the one that one works really well. I keep my output slow, but I love, like, it's hard for me to eat and not have like, a beverage with me. So that's always an interesting one for me. And then it's trying to do things like thickener foods. So sweet potatoes, rice, all of these things that we know can slow output. I'm eating those with every single meal I'm having. Um, and so and then depending on my weight, I also do smoothies. And so I use a Kate Farms peptide that works for me. There's tons of nutritional shakes out there. So, talk to your doctor, figure out what works for you if you need that. I use actually a tube feed formula, but I use it as a smoothie base.
Okay.
And so it's very gentle, no sugar, like lots of protein. And then I put, peanut butter, frozen banana, or I put roasted sweet potatoes or things like that, because I'm also trying very hard to also manage potassium, magnesium, sodium, all of these things that if you have a high output ileostomy, you're more likely to have those imbalances. And so I've had to be in the hospital because I've had lower electrolytes before. So I try very hard to make sure I'm getting those as well. And it's a lot of work. I mean, that's something that I talk a lot about with, disability. Maintaining my baseline in and of itself is a full-time job. Because I'm always having to manage what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, hydration. And it's like this balancing act where when I get it right, we're really good. But when it's not right, I get off center, then I'm having things like dehydration causing tachycardia. I'm having other complications. So it's always balancing. And then the other thing I do is high protein.
Mhm. High protein is key, period.
Yeah.
Like we all need protein. I mean, protein's what our bodies are built on. It's so easy when I count my I count my macros. I watch my protein. When I don't, when I don't, I know I'm not eating enough. Now I'm a fitness competitor through and through from my past. So I'm still always like
Yeah.
protein, protein, protein. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from meat because I eat more vegetarian,
I do
pescatarian
too.
than I do meat eater. It's very rare you see meat on my plate. Chicken, turkey, okay, but other than that, it's very rare you see anything else on my plate. So protein is really key and really important for all the building blocks in our bodies. When it comes to supplementation, I'm huge. I love supplements. You should see my cabinet. You should see the amount of supplements this body takes. Again, works for me. And like you
Yep.
said, talk to your doctor as well about what you should be doing. Get with a nutritionist as
Yes.
well who understands ostomies. There are some out there that do understand ostomies, and they may even be in an ostomy themselves to help
Yep.
you with that stuff. So we've talked about so much and I love it. You do a lot of work. So since all of this, and you mentioned it, you do a lot of work with girls with guts.
Do.
What is that foundation? I know what it is, but what is that foundation for someone who doesn't know what the foundation is, and what do you guys do?
So Girls with Guts, we're a nonprofit. We empower women that have IBD and or ostomies, right? So we have a subsection of individuals who have IBD and they don't have ostomies. And then we have individuals that have IBD and ostomies, or they have ostomies for other reasons. Cancer is one of those reasons, obviously. So we offer online educational resources. We have a ton of, fact sheets that have been medically reviewed. We've got an active blog, all of those things. And then we offer in-person programming as well. And so we usually do, this year we're taking a break, but we usually do new attendee retreats as well as an annual retreat. And these are times for women to come together. We do sisterhood building at the annual retreat. We bring in speakers, we do activities, those kinds of things. Then we also have online programming. So we have a private forum of over 8,000 women. So you can go and ask questions. It's well moderated. So you're gonna be getting good information. And then we also have things like our Gotta Go cards that can communicate the need to use a bathroom discreetly. We have a program that's currently paused, but it's the butt basket program. And that's for people who are going to be getting an ostomy surgery. We're going to send you the stuff that we found the hard way. Like we talked with my dad a little bit. So many of us were like stumbling around in the dark going, oh, what do you mean belly bands? What do you mean there's more than this one supply? What do you mean that these things, or what do you mean about oral rehydration solution? What is that? So we send those out in the butt basket kits. We also have an infusion kit because for IBD, a lot of medicines are IV infusions. And so in the infusion kit, it's like comfort items because you're going to be sitting in a chair, like in an infusion lab. Or if you have cancer and you're getting chemotherapy, same situation. And those are like comfort. So fuzzy socks, a journal, like a book to read while you're going through that. And then we also do a variety of other things. We're going to have a Facebook Live coming up at the end of the month with 3 GI psychologist professionals. We're going to talk about mental health and IBD and ostomies. Sometimes we do things called craft afternoons where you just get together and you just talk and you work on a craft project. So it's really fun. And it also is the resource I wish existed when I was, in my early 20s, trying to figure out this new life. And I'm always blessed to be surrounded by other women that have IBD and ostomies. Like, what a great thing it is to find community.
Community is key. It's why I do this podcast. It's why I reach out to people. We need each other. We need each other
We do.
in a big way. Because what we're going through, most people don't understand. I know I've said there's, 1 million people here in the US with an ostomy, but there's 13.5 million around the world with an ostomy. And I wonder how many of those are in rural countries, like your dad back in the day, rural Vermont, and don't have access to the things that we now have access to. I think more and more. I went to a mission trip in Honduras last year, and let me tell you, they might live in little huts, but they got cell phones.
Yes.
They're starting to have cell phones, which is good. So this has just been such an informative episode, Jenny. I can't thank you enough for it. I ask this of everyone at the end. If there was one thing, just one thing you would want to leave our listeners with, what would that one thing be?
Ostomies are not limited. Ostomies are the gateway to a life that is phenomenal, and you can do anything with an ostomy that you can do without one. There's no barrier, there's no limit. It's only what you think you can't do.
That is the perfect way to end this episode. Jenny, thank you again so much for all your knowledge and sharing everything with us.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so grateful to have been here with you, and I'm so grateful for this podcast. I'm going to be driving to my sister's in New York later, and I'm going to be listening to your latest episode as I go, because it's such a great resource you offer here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gents, we will chat with you next week. We're still going to be in the love and relationships. It's February, so stay tuned for next week's episode, and we'll talk to you all soon.